The sun finds its way through the living room window, just so, laying a warm, dusty stripe across the worn floral pattern of my armchair. It's a quiet time of day when the house settles into its own breathing and the street outside is holding its breath for the evening rush. My fingers, gnarled and slow, turn the slick pages of an old magazine I found cleaning out a closet. The paper is smooth, cooler than you'd expect. I stop on a picture of a car, a light blue 1965 Ford Thunderbird. It shines on the page, a monument to a time that feels both a lifetime ago and like yesterday morning. I don't smile, I just look. My breath is even, but my stillness is heavy. There's a silence in this room that holds more than just the absence of sound. It holds all the things you chose not to say, all the roads you made a conscious decision not to travel. My thumb traces the clean, hopeful lines of the Thunderbird, from the sharp edge of the fender to the gentle curve of the roof. It was a beautiful machine, but more than that, it was a beautiful idea. An idea of freedom, of moving through the world without a second thought. I spent a long life being careful, making sure I was seen the right way, the safe way. It worked. I'm here. But as I stare at this photograph, a question surfaces, quiet and sharp. What's the cost of a dream you never even tried to buy? It's a funny thing, memory. How a simple picture printed on glossy paper can pull a whole lifetime into a single quiet moment in an armchair. You live long enough, you find you've collected a whole attic full of these moments. Some are loud and clear, like church bells on a Sunday morning, while others are just quiet whispers you almost forget you're still carrying with you. My name is Harold Eugene Mitchell. I'm 80 years old, and I've learned that it's those quietest whispers that often have the most to say. They're the ones that shaped you in ways you didn't see happening, bending the road just enough that you ended up somewhere entirely different without ever hearing the turn. I must have been around 27 at the time, working a steady job at the post office with a little money saved up that felt like a mountain to me. I'd seen the Thunderbird in magazines, but seeing it in person was something else entirely. It was parked right in the center of the showroom floor, under the big lights, looking like it had just been delivered from the future. I remember the smell of the place, a mix of wax, new rubber, and a kind of clean, sterile air that made you feel you ought to straighten your tie. I'd worn my best suit, the gray one I saved for church, and my shoes were shined so bright I could see my own nervous face in them. I felt I belonged there. I had worked for it. The car itself was a shade of blue that reminded me of the sky right after a summer storm, clean and full of promise. The chrome trim caught the light from every angle, and the white leather interior looked softer than a cloud. I walked around it twice, my hands clasped behind my back, afraid to touch it and leave a smudge. In my mind, I could already feel the weight of the steering wheel, hear the low rumble of the engine. It wasn't just about getting from one place to another. That car was about being able to go anywhere, about the freedom to just drive without a destination. It was a symbol that I had made it, that my hard work meant something visible, something beautiful. The salesman came over after a minute. He was a tall, thin man with slicked back hair and a smile that seemed permanently affixed to his face, though it never quite managed to warm his eyes. He called me "Sir," but the word felt hollow, like a coin dropped on a tile floor. I asked him about the engine, the mileage, the price, all the right questions. I kept my voice steady and calm, making sure my grammar was perfect, making sure I looked him right in the eye. I was performing the role of a serious customer, a man who couldn't be dismissed. He answered my questions with a crisp professional tone, but I could feel him measuring me, calculating something that had nothing to do with my bank account. The moment came when I asked if I could take it for a test drive. His smile tightened just a fraction. He looked from me to the car, then back to me. "That's a car that turns a lot of heads on the road," he said, his voice smooth as glass. "Sir, are you prepared for that kind of attention?" He didn't raise his voice. He didn't use a single ugly word. But I heard everything he wasn't saying. He wasn't talking about people admiring the car. He was talking about a different kind of attention, the kind of attention that asks what a man like me is doing in a car like that. He was giving me a warning disguised as a piece of friendly advice. I stood there for a second, the showroom lights feeling hot on my face. All the air went out of the room. The beautiful blue car suddenly looked dangerous. I just nodded slowly, a perfect picture of calm consideration. "Thank you," I said. "I'll have to think about that." I turned and walked out of the dealership, my back straight, my steps even. I didn't let my shoulders slump until I was 2 blocks away. I never went back. That day I learned that some dreams are heavier than you think. You can have the money in your pocket and the desire in your heart, but there are other prices, other costs that aren't written on the sticker. For the longest time, I told myself that walking out of that dealership was an act of wisdom, not surrender. I framed it as a choice rooted in practicality. A man building a future, a family, didn't need a flashy car that screamed for attention. I needed something sensible, dependable. I repeated this story to myself until it felt like the absolute truth. The anger that had flared up inside me was quickly doused with the cold water of logic. It was an extravagance, a foolish whim, and that salesman had simply reminded me of the world I lived in. I wasn't defeated. I was being strategic. I was playing the long game. For many years, that was the only version of the story I allowed myself to remember. But sitting here now, with 80 years behind me, I see the ghost of that young man, and the lines are not so clear. I feel a strange mix of pride and a deep, aching sorrow for him. He held his head high. He maintained his composure. He did what was necessary to protect a piece of his soul. But I also see the fear that he dressed up as dignity. The rage he swallowed didn't just vanish, it settled in his bones. It became a permanent part of his posture, a quiet hum of vigilance that never truly went away. He learned a powerful lesson about survival, but in doing so, he gave up something vital. He won the battle for his composure, but he lost a little bit of light inside himself. The true conflict wasn't with that man in his shiny shoes. The conflict was with me for all the years that followed. It was the internal debate that happened every time I had to make a choice between what I wanted and what was safe. I wonder now how many other small dreams I walked away from, not because I couldn't afford them, but because I had learned the cost of that attention. I built a good life, a strong life, a life I am thankful for, but I have to ask myself what it cost. In my quest to be seen as respectable and beyond reproach, did I forget how to simply be? I don't have a perfect answer. It's just a question that lives with me now, in the quiet of the afternoon. Just then, the quiet of the room is broken by the sound of my grandson David's footsteps, lighter and quicker than my own have been for many years. He comes in with a wide grin, holding his phone out like it's a winning lottery ticket. "Grandpa, look," he says, his voice full of that particular brand of excitement only the young seem to possess. On the screen is a picture of a simple used sedan, a bit faded around the edges but clean. To him, it's not just a car. It's the whole world on 4 wheels. He swipes through photos showing me the interior, the engine, talking about the deal he got. I just listen and nod, a genuine warmth spreading through my chest for his happiness. He goes on, telling me about the road trip he and his friends are planning for the summer. "No destination, Grandpa," he says, his eyes shining with the idea. "Just get in and drive. Feel the road, you know? The best part is not having a plan, just stopping wherever feels right." And with those simple words, a chill I haven't felt in years runs right down my spine. The phrase "wherever feels right" sounds like a language from another planet. I remember our family trips, every single mile planned with the precision of a military campaign. I had a book, a green one, that listed the places we were allowed to stop for gas, the towns we had to be through before the sun went down. Watching him so full of this beautiful, careless freedom, I see the bars of a cage I didn't even know I was in for most of my life. His liberty, which he wears as easily as his own skin, is a stark and sudden mirror to my own past. For him, the open road is a promise. For me, it was a series of calculations, a map of dangers to be navigated. I am so deeply glad for him, for the world that allows him to dream of stopping wherever feels right. But it's a gladness that lives right next to a quiet, heavy sorrow for the young man I was, who learned to see a map not as a world of possibilities, but as a territory of survival. For decades, I told myself that walking out of that showroom was one of the wisest decisions I had ever made. I framed it as a moment of profound maturity, a conscious choice to prioritize a future home over a beautiful machine, to put my family's security above a young man's fleeting pride. I saw my caution as a strength and ability to read the world and calmly sidestep the traps it laid for men like me. Every sensible car I bought after that, every carefully planned vacation, every quiet evening at home seemed to prove that story right. I was Harold Eugene Mitchell, a man who didn't take foolish risks. I built a fortress of respectability around my family, brick by sensible brick, and I was proud of its unbreachable walls. But watching the unburdened light in my grandson's eyes as he talks about a road with no map, it forces me to see that old story for what it truly is. A well-crafted lie I told myself to make a cruel world feel manageable. It wasn't just wisdom that made me turn my back on that beautiful blue car. It was fear, a deep, cold, and practical fear that I was too proud to ever name, even to myself. I called it prudence because prudence is a respectable virtue. Fear is not. I see now that my whole life was a map of carefully navigated fears, not a journey of wise choices. I wasn't just avoiding traps, I was avoiding life itself, or at least the parts of it that felt too bright, too loud, too visible. The truth, the kind that only settles in your bones after a long time on this earth, is that prudence and fear can wear the exact same face. They speak with the same calm voice and offer the same sensible advice. I spent my years trying to be so unimpeachable, so cautious that no one could ever find a reason to harm me or my own. And I succeeded. I kept my family safe. But in the process of shielding myself from what others might do, I gave up essential pieces of who I might have been. My greatest victory, this safety, this quiet life, was paid for with my quietest loss, the simple, unthinking freedom to just be myself without calculation. When I watch young people walk into a room today, I see a confidence my generation had to fight for inch by inch. They carry themselves with an assumption of belonging that I find myself admiring, but then I see a different kind of caution take hold. I see it in the way they measure their words, curating their lives for a world that is always watching, always ready to pass judgment. They aren't worried about the same salesman I met, but they are worried about a different kind of attention, a different kind of showroom. They perform a different version of respectability, but it is a performance all the same. I just watch, and I wonder what small, beautiful things they are deciding not to drive off the lot. Sometimes in a conversation, I hear a particular kind of quiet settle over a person. It's not the quiet of someone who is listening. It's the quiet of someone who has just made a calculation. They were about to say something, share a thought, voice a disagreement, and in a split second they decided against it. They chose peace over truth, safety over expression. I recognize that silence. I know its weight. It tastes like swallowed words and the metallic tang of prudence. It's the sound of a door being gently closed on a part of yourself. I see it in my neighbors, in folks at the grocery store, and I never judge. I just nod because I know that cage wasn't built in a day. It makes me think about the little bargains we all make with the world to get through our days. We don't think of them as sacrifices at the time. They feel like smart decisions, like necessary adjustments. You learn not to laugh too loudly in certain company, not to seem too ambitious, not to want something too much. Each one is just a small thing, a minor course correction. But you live 80 years and you realize that a lifetime of these small sensible adjustments can steer you so far from who you started out as, you barely recognize the road you're on. You look back and see that your safety was paid for with a currency you didn't even know you were spending. The afternoon light has softened, and the stripe of sun on my armchair has crept across the floor, now resting on the worn rug. My hand is still on the magazine page, the paper warmed by my touch. I look at that blue thunderbird, and for the first time I don't feel the sting of a missed opportunity. I see a monument to a choice, not a choice made in a single moment on a showroom floor, but a choice I remade every day for 60 years, a choice to be careful, to be quiet, to build a life so sturdy and respectable that no one could ever find a reason to knock it down. I understand the young man who walked out of that dealership. He did what he had to do to survive. He traded a beautiful idea for a solid reality. And so, what is the cost of a dream you never tried to buy? I think I know now. The price isn't the thing you walk away from. The real price is the caution that becomes a part of your bones, the silence that becomes your first language. It's the habit of measuring the world not for its beauty, but for its danger. I built a good life, a safe harbor for my family, and I would not trade that for anything. But I understand now that the walls of a harbor also mark the boundary of the sea. You can be grateful for the safety of the shore and still, in the quiet moments, feel the ache of an ocean you never allowed yourself to sail. We spend our lives taught to measure the cost of making a scene, of speaking out of turn, of wanting something too loudly. We learn to calculate the risks of standing out, of drawing that unwanted attention the salesman warned me about all those years ago. It is a necessary arithmetic for survival, and I mastered it well. I learned to weigh every word, every ambition against the potential for trouble. I became an expert in the economics of staying safe, but what no one ever teaches you, what you only learn when you have more yesterdays than tomorrows, is that you must also calculate the cost of your own quiet. You have to account for the price of all the words you swallowed. I built a good life on that quiet. A sturdy, respectable life that didn't make a lot of noise and in turn didn't attract a lot of trouble. It was a good trade, I always told myself. I traded the roar of a thunderbird for the peaceful hum of a safe home. But now in the stillness of my own making, I can hear the echo of what's missing. I can feel the weight of all that unspent joy, all those unvoiced desires. We are so busy protecting ourselves from the world's noise that we forget to listen to our own. We forget that choosing not to speak is still a choice, and it has a cost. Silence has a price, too. I imagine there are stories like this tucked away in your own family, perhaps even in your own life. Stories that were kept quiet not because there was a lack of love, but because there was an abundance of caution. The reasons were different, I'm sure, for each of us, but the silence often feels the same. We all learn to navigate the world we are given, and sometimes that means leaving certain dreams parked in the showroom of our hearts untouched. Perhaps if and when the time ever feels right for you, it might be worth taking a quiet moment to just listen. Listen to those old silences, your own or those of the people you love. You might be surprised by what they have to say.